that sunshine. So that's a picture on Wednesday, through Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. It's another clear night. The winds pick up across most parts, but again, as it hops over the highlands, you will see some warmer air across the western side in shelter from that wind. But through the night, temperatures dipping down close to freezing again in those shelter spots towards the northwest. Elsewhere, 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius. A bit of a cold start to the day come Thursday morning. And this rain just towards the near continent may just affect the far southeast through Thursday. Again, that wind will be strong, feeling cold in that wind. Here's your outlook through Thursday and into Friday, turning showery and cooler into the weekend.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Did you see the ridiculousness at the snooker last night? The protesters getting on and chucking orange chalk basically all over the table. Well, now there's fears that the London Marathon could be targeted in the same way. Yes, that will be the same London Marathon that raises about £40 million for charity. Come on now, enough is enough, isn't it? And if not, when will be enough in your mind? And £1,600 a month. That doesn't sound bad, does it? That is the amount of money that Wales is planning to give the most vulnerable people crossing the Channel. Do you think that's fair? Are you in the camp which says, absolutely, these young, vulnerable people need that money and support? Or are you on the flip side, which says pack it in? What about withdrawing the pull factors to this country? Never mind increasing them. Your thoughts on that? And speaking again of this weekend, the emergency alerts will be tested on our mobile phones. What do you make to this? A good, sensible, noble endeavour by the government to keep us safe, or quite a bit of government overreach? And when it comes to brands, do you think they care more about wokeness than they do their core customer base? Budweiser is in hot water, just as one tiny example, but there are many more. We'll get into all of that and more, but before we do, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary is set to declare the small boats crisis a national emergency. The move comes in response to a High Court challenge tomorrow aimed at halting government plans to house asylum seekers on an old RAF base in Essex. Braintree Council will attempt to secure an injunction preventing the transfer of 1,700 migrants to the Wethersfield Air Base. The declaration of a national emergency would give the Home Office powers to ignore local authority objections if the plans relate to Crown-owned property. Well, this all comes as the latest figures show more than 5,000 people have crossed the English Channel so far this year. The SNP treasurer has been arrested by police investigating the party's finances. Colin Beattie is the second person to be questioned by detectives who are trying to establish how more than £600,000 in donations set aside for an independence referendum had been used. Earlier this month, the Scottish National Party's former chief executive, Peter Murrell, was questioned for more than 11 hours. Mr Murrell, who's the husband of former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, was released without charge pending further investigation. When questioned in Holyrood, SNP leader Humza Yousaf hit back at the Conservatives.
It is brave, some may use another word for it, when it comes to talking about propriety. Your Prime Minister, your Deputy Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister are all under investigation by the Standards Commission. So yes, while we face challenges, while we absolutely face challenges, I'd rather be standing here with the opportunity to deliver for the people of Scotland rather than languishing in the opposition like Megan Gallagher and the Scottish Tories.
The Scottish First Minister also set out his vision for the country in his first major policy statement since taking office. Mr Yousaf said the party will focus on equality, opportunity and community. He also announced a delay in the deposit return scheme for drinks cans and bottles, as well as a 6-month trial to remove peak time fares from ScotRail trains. Labour's demanding transparency, calling on the Prime Minister to publish his financial interests today. Parliament's ethics watchdogs investigating whether Rishi Sunak failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major announcement in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency, likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says Mr Sunak will clarify why it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, wants the Prime Minister to come clean.
I think transparency really does matter, and the Prime Minister did promise transparency and integrity, and so he does have to clear this up and declare what his interest is. The Ministerial Register has not been published for nearly a year, so I think for the Prime Minister today, he should publish his part of the register, clear this up and be open about this issue.
An American journalist has lost an appeal against his detention in Russia. Evan Gershkovich will be held in Moscow prison until at least the 29th of May on charges of espionage. Mr Gershkovich, who works for the Wall Street Journal, is accused of trying to obtain military secrets on behalf of Washington and faces a possible 20-year sentence if convicted. The newspaper says the charges are a vicious affront to a free press. Speaking outside the court, the US ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, called for his immediate release.
I can report that he is in good health and remains strong despite his circumstances. We will continue to provide all appropriate support to Evan and his family, and we expect Russian authorities to provide continued consular access to Evan. The charges against Evan are baseless, and we call on the Russian Federation to immediately release him.
More machetes and zombie knives could be banned in England and Wales, with criminals who buy or sell them facing up to 2 years in jail. Under plans, police could also be given new powers to seize and destroy weapons. Home Office Minister Chris Philp told GB News the move would make communities safer.
It will be a criminal offence to manufacture, supply, import or possess these dangerous knives in private. There's no reason to have these knives, no legitimate use. They are only used by criminals to intimidate and threaten the public, or indeed to engage in inter-gang warfare. That's why we're taking decisive action today to make these dangerous knives illegal.
And charities and campaigners are warning new rules for energy supplies don't go far enough. Firms across England, Scotland and Wales have agreed to a new voluntary code of practice to help protect vulnerable people. Under the new rules, suppliers must make at least 10 attempts to contact a customer and carry out a welfare visit before a prepayment meter can be installed. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition says the plans failed to deal with energy debt relief for those most in need. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party and Atul Hatwal is the editor of Labour Uncut. Good evening, gentlemen. You know the drill, don't you, on this show? It's not just about us. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch all the usual ways. GBviews at gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at GBnews. Lots to get into tonight. But I wonder, did you see the absolute, what I would call ridiculousness last night at the World Snooker Championships? I must confess, I wasn't sitting there watching it live. Snooker is not my thing. But when I did see it, the protesters and what they were up to, quite frankly, I was absolutely appalled. I'm showing it on the screen as we speak. You know, top players minding their own business, setting up the shots, and off jumps some pillock onto the table, scattering and spraying his bright orange dust as he goes, while simultaneously on the table alongside him, some equally pillock female tries to attach herself to the table, but doesn't stand much of a chance against the fast-moving security guard, which very promptly removed her. Now, that was just Stop Oil. And we're looking ahead now to this weekend. Apparently, there's fears that these guys will try and target London Marathon. Now, if you're a regular viewer to this programme, you will know that I've always been reluctant to kind of cover these sorts of protests because, quite frankly, I want to deprive them of the very thing that they want, which is the oxygen of publicity. But when it comes, David Curtin, to one of the biggest fundraising events that many charities look forward to in their fundraising calendar, the London Marathon. I think it's about 38 million it raised last year. You know, I draw the line at that. People train very hard to push themselves beyond their usual physical limits. And, you know, I get that these guys have a message. I get that they have their frustrations and they're entitled to them. But it's crossing a line for me now. Where do you stand?
Well, they crossed a line many months ago. You know, there was Extinction Rebellion, then there was Insulate Britain, now there's Just Stop Oil, and they're just making a nuisance of themselves. I mean, this is not legitimate protest. I agree with everyone's right to protest peacefully and legitimately, but you don't go and interrupt events which are going on, like the Snooker Championship here, and then you're talking about the London Marathon. They've gone to many galleries around the world, you know, in the UK and then their sister organisations in Europe as well, just, you know, actually trying to ruin old pieces of art. I mean, they're now resorting to tactics which are just alienating them from everybody that they want to appeal to.
But they would argue it would be a pretty rubbish protest if they did it in the corner of a field when no one was watching. They're trying to raise awareness of their cause, so that is why they're targeting these high-profile events.
Well, they're totally entitled to protest around central London or in city centres. I mean, there's many protests. There's almost every week there's a protest about something in central London, in Trafalgar Square or Parliament Square, and you can get your point across there because MPs are walking up and down the road, Whitehall around Parliament, and that's the perfect way, legitimate way to protest. But doing this and interrupting events, and potentially now they're talking about interrupting the London Marathon, ruining people's days who have trained hard, raising money for charity, is absolutely the wrong thing to do. It's utterly deplorable.
Where do you stand on it, Athol?
I'm no fan of these sorts of protests, but we've got to understand what their motivation is. And Michelle, you said it at the start, it's publicity. There's no point from their perspective, just from a communications viewpoint here, just kind of holding a placard at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. They're on your show, and we're talking about them. They're on the news. They're on kind of multiple shows up and down the country, and it's being beamed out into people's homes. It's being shared on social media. They've achieved what they want, and their objective or their issue is legitimate. So, whilst I don't agree necessarily with what they're doing, and it's difficult for the players and terrible for the spectators, they've achieved what they want, and it's a valid communications tactic.
Well, one of these groups, I was just looking at the statement that they said, there will be ongoing disruption until the government meets our demand to end new oil and gas. We will continue to disrupt sports and cultural events until the institutions join us in civil resistance against our genocidal government's plans to licence new oil and gas. Do you think that's a bit extreme?
Well, someone's obviously read a bit too much Marx and a bit too much Mao and kind of, has got himself a bit het up. That, I think, is florid language and speaking to their base. If they were to keep this up and public opinion looks like turning against them, then they've lost the battle. I think what they're actually trying to achieve is some cut through, keep their issue at the top of the agenda without generating widespread hostility. I think the evidence was when Insulate Britain did this. They were at the point where people were about to turn against them, and they kept on pushing. But they got their issue through, and when the polls were done afterwards, insulation became much higher up in the hierarchy of issues that people were responding about.
Yeah, and just Stop Oil, they said, these are their words, not mine, if the polls are correct, about 60% of London Marathon runners support our demand to stop new oil and gas. Well, I don't mean to be boastful, but I've ran a few marathons myself, and I've done London twice. And the amount of time and effort and dedication that goes into that, I imagine, and a lot of people get very nervous, especially if it's their first marathon. It's a big deal. It's pre-race nerves the night before. They're all very real, as is the fear of hitting the wall and all the rest of it. So, yes, I dare say that some people might have concerns about climate change that are doing that run. But I'd be fascinated to know, and you might be a runner, by the way. You might be listening and watching at home. You might be one of those runners. Does your passion for the climate overtake your passion for the funds that you want to raise for one of your most kind of heartfelt charities that you want to support? I don't know. You get in touch and tell me. But linked to this, we saw a vote in the House of Lords last night about trying to stop the government in England opening any new coal mines, and it passed by a very small margin. I think it was 3 votes was the difference. Do you think that was a key vote? Do you think that's going to change anything going forward? Do you think it was the right decision?
Oh, it's a terrible vote. This is the wrong thing to do for the future of the country. I mean, this government, the Conservative government, has closed 11 of our 14 coal power stations. So we don't have enough energy, really, to provide our needs cheaply and reliably. So where energy prices have gone through the roof because of what's happened in the past, this is now saying they can't open any new coal power stations in the future and go back and try to rebuild our coal power if a government comes in that wants to do it. But it's not set in stone because this is just the Lords. It's got to go to the Commons and get through the Commons as well. Hopefully it won't do that there. But then even if it does get through, there's a general election coming soon. Obviously, I run a party that is for restoring and rebuilding our coal, oil and gas power infrastructure so we have enough cheap, reliable, continuous energy to keep lights on in houses and to keep industry running. And this is just going totally the wrong direction for our country and for our economy.
Do you agree with that, or going in the wrong direction?
I think the Lords' vote's largely irrelevant. Coal is of the past. The economics for coal don't work in this country. I'm a Labour person. I certainly don't agree with much that Mrs Thatcher did. But on the basic point that coal is too costly to extract from the ground, I think she was right. There was that coal mine that's about to be open, that caused a kerfuffle about being open in Cumbria. It's not even going to supply any coal to power for the UK. We have an energy
No, but it's
supply
coking coal, isn't it, for the steel industry, that one, wasn't it?
But it's not even the steel industry in the UK. None of it was going to go to the UK, and it's not even clear it's actually going to open. The economics don't work. So whether the Lords passes a vote, it gets turned back by the Commons, however it works, what powers this, what powers development is money and investment, and the investment isn't there. So it's kind of, much of a muchness. We're not going to have new coal mines in this country. We're going to have to find other ways of sourcing energy. We're doing a damn good job of it as well.
What's the matter with you? You were shaking your head and all the rest of it when he was talking then.
Well, you're talking about something that's happening in the 80s. And, yeah, maybe it was uneconomic in the 80s. Not all of the coal mines in the 80s were uneconomic, but now they are. And now we are importing coal from Poland in order to keep the 3 coal power stations that we've got open. Why not use our great coal resources that we got in this country to keep the coal power stations open that we've got now and open more in the future?
A free market economy, and investors aren't putting their money into that because it doesn't give them a return. Where I draw the line, if we had wildly economic coal and that was going to we're going to solve our energy crisis and lower all our energy bills, God knows we all want our lower energy bills, I'd actually think, OK, there is a case for that. But the market says no, the economics don't work. And, without wanting to quote Thatcher again, you can't buck the market.
But is that because there's so many subsidies and all the rest of it at the moment thrown at green industry and so-called clean energy? So if you're looking to, I don't know, put your money somewhere, when you're being littered and confetted with subsidies and grants and all the rest of it from governments, that is an attractive proposition.
There is a broader social benefit to a transition to greener energy, to greener energy, and there is a global competition. We have got
what's the wider social benefit?
Wider social benefit is that we reduce our emissions. We have in the US the Inflation Reduction Act, which is putting huge amounts of money behind green industry. We've got similar in the EU. On that global playing field, we have to compete. But going back to the kind of core point, the economics of coal in this country don't work. It's a debate of the past. We need to focus on the future, where our future energy is going to come from. And it's not me saying that. It's the market. It's investors. It's the people with the money who are making that call.
Well, every kind of power, every kind of energy source needs investment from the government. Coal will work if we invest in it. It's just the decision's been made not to invest in it and to de-invest in it. And that's not because of the economics. It's because of this adherence to climate alarmism and this push for net zero, because the government signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement.
Unfortunately, David, the facts don't back you up there.
No, we've also got this coal, and I'm also talking about oil and gas as well. And we need to build up those 3 sources of power, along with nuclear, small nuclear power stations, and not go down this road that is even more unsustainable economically of solar and wind, because wind and solar don't produce any energy or very little energy when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. Coal, oil, gas and nuclear will be far more economically beneficial than solar and wind.
The point about energy, it's a mix. There's solar, there's wind. We have to find ways to efficiently store that. There are ways. We are increasing our reliance on renewables. Where it comes to things like oil and gas, there's a higher bar threshold to cross there, I think, but to make it worthwhile. But if there is any route to cheap energy for the country, no one's going to say no to that. That's not going to be a political battlefield. It's the fact that the money isn't there to invest because the returns aren't there to invest in things like coal, and declining in areas like gas and oil.
Graham, one of my viewers, has said, if coal power is of the past, please can you ask Atul then why are other countries such as Germany, China, etc., still building them?
Different economics. So I'm saying coal is of the past for this country. There will be parts of the world where coal is very, very economic. There are plentiful supplies. It doesn't cost as much to extract. Again, this isn't just a random opinion. This is the judgment of the market. The people who invest in this, they have a choice where they put their money globally. It's not going into the UK to open coal mines. It's going to other parts of the world.
One of my viewers says, Nick is my viewer. He says, talking about the disruption of the sporting events, so the horse racing and the snooker, he says, I'd love to see these protesters try and stop a boxing match. I have to say, Nick, you must have read my mind, because I was saying and thinking exactly that this morning. I wonder how they would get on. It does remind me a little bit, I don't know if you ever saw it, of the protest on the train at Canning Town when, I mean, I shouldn't laugh, and obviously I don't encourage violence, obviously, but there was a protester on top of the train and he picked the wrong station, and you'll see it online. He literally got yanked off that train quicker than a quick thing from Quickland. His protest was very short-lived, that is for sure. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. Do you support the protesters? Do you think actually disrupting a marathon or a snooker match or whatever it is a small price to pay for the future of our climate? Are you in that camp? If so, get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your thoughts. In particular, I want to ask you about this topic as well. £1,600 a month. That's not bad if you can get it. And if you're in Wales and apparently a vulnerable asylum seeker, then you could, if plans go ahead, be in line for that kind of payment. Is that a good idea or not? I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Doing some very...
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party, and Atul Hatwell is the editor of Labour Uncut. Welcome back, everybody. Ellie says new technology coal mines would be very profitable. Automation and robotics could potentially reduce human labour. But there, Ellis, that defeats one of the arguments, because some people will argue about opening coal mines, etc., for the job opportunities that it may create. Ken says solar panels do not work because it takes So many tons of coal burning to make one standard sheet, he says. What does that mean? Oh, in terms of actually making the... OK, yeah, I've caught up now. I was thinking that a standard sheet was a unit of energy or something, but I've just cottoned on to what you're talking about. Right, let's move on, shall we? The Labour Party in Wales wants to enrol child migrants to a scheme that would help them receive £1,600 a month once they turn 18. This is quite similar, by the way, to the scheme that's already operating in Wales, where children that are in the care system, they already receive a basic income once they get to the age of 18. So this would be a potential extension of that scheme. Atul, you are the editor of Labour Uncut. I therefore imagine that you would wholeheartedly back this proposal, am I right?
You're right.
Why?
It's unequivocally
Tell me why.
two reasons: compassion and practicality. Compassion, it's actually including children who have come to this country unaccompanied, who are in the care system in Wales, so as part of that existing scheme. And the reason for the scheme is that when they turn 18, they're leaving the care system. They haven't got mum or dad, they haven't got uncles, aunts or a family network. And rather than having to go to claim job seekers allowance or income support or all the different benefits, they get this universal, housing benefit. They get this single, simple income. And it's time limited for 2 years. And as a point of compassion, as you're leaving the care system and helping that transition into adulthood, it makes sense to try support young people. From a practical perspective, though, it's also a good idea because that's when people are very vulnerable to criminality, to being targeted by all sorts of bad sorts, and to help people make that transition. That, whether it's for migrants or indeed for just for care leavers, that can only be a good thing because it's the state that would have to pick up the tab for if people are dragged into criminality or being exploited.
I've got a couple of questions for you, but before I do, I suspect that you might have a different view, David. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a scheme that shouldn't happen. I mean, it's all very well to talk about compassion, but the thing is, a lot of people who are classified as unaccompanied migrants are 16 or 17-year-old boys who are coming over. They know what they're doing. They're planning to come over to anchor themselves in the country. They come just before they're 18, and then when they get to 18, then they can claim the benefits and play the system. So the thing is, what this is doing is completely playing into the hands of criminal gangs and people who are working the system because they know and they're getting advised from people in groups like Care for Calais, do this, do this, do this, come to this place, claim this, claim that. And they know what they can do and they're getting rewarded for coming over and they're not genuine asylum seekers. There are lots of people who are playing the system and I don't think we should giving them a lot of money. No, if I can just finish. There was a lot of people... Yeah, just a couple of seconds. There's a lot of people who are playing the system. They're doing this. They know they're getting rewarded, and this is just another reward for people who are playing the system.
So 2 points. One, the facts don't bear that out. 85% of people who come here and claim asylum have refugee status awarded. So the vast majority are genuine. Point two, the people we're talking about here are children. You can say they're 16-year-old, you can say they're 15-year-old. They are children.
How do you ascertain their age?
That is at the point when they come and claim asylum. That's
So a 25-year-old could turn up and say that I'm 17 and a half.
A 45-year-old could come and say that, and it is down to the judgment of the Home Office to make that call. Frankly, the number for an adult to claim to be a child. That can happen.
This happens a lot.
It can happen, but I'm going to contend that happens in the minority of cases. This scheme is targeted at children. And one of the kind of key points here is that we are actually only discussing this scheme. There's only going to be a number of... The only reason it's been extended in this way, the only reason there's going to be a number of migrants involved is that we have these huge backlogs in our asylum system. We have 132,000 outstanding decisions. It takes 20 months before an initial decision. 10 years ago, it was 4 months. If we had shorter decision times, then either the children would have leave to remain and they'd be in the scheme just the same way as their peers are, as the kids born here, or they'd have their status revoked and then they would have to be moved out of the country. The driver here, the real issue, is that whacking great backlog, which has just grown and grown and grown.
Yes, but the backlog is so big because the volume coming is so great. We're at 5,000 this year already. So isn't there a part of you that's slightly concerned that actually, if what you then start doing is increasing funds available, that actually it's going to be counterproductive because by your own logic, the backlogs are huge already. If you start incentivising, I mean, no one should want to incentivise learned children to cross channels. Aren't you worried that you might have a counterproductive outcome?
Two things there. One, the incentive for a lone child to cross the channel, it's not about whether someone gets benefits here. It's about the scale of terror from where they're coming. Well, from where they're coming from.
Which is France.
Well, however they're getting here.
No, but they're coming from France, though, aren't they? So the scale of terror that they're subjected to in France is pretty much non-existent.
No, because people don't come exclusively via small boats. People claim asylum coming into this country from multiple routes, and it's a myth to say that the majority of asylum seekers are coming just across the channel from France.
Some are coming from Belgium, yeah.
But and then in terms of that backlog, it's not, if we can get that backlog down, if we can return to a situation that used to be 10 years ago where claims are processed, then this whole situation becomes much, much easier to manage. Yes, numbers coming have risen, but the numbers coming to the UK are a fraction of those that come to other countries. 191,000 came to Germany. They've got a backlog,
we don't
which
live
is
in Germany, we live in the UK.
But a fraction of the backlog. It's about the state's ability to do basic functions like process claims.
Germany can't cope either. It's way too many. They've got the same situation as us. There's a lot of pull factors. There's a lot of reward if you get to Germany, just like there is if you come to the UK. Sweden's another country. In Norway, they're target countries for people who want to come through a lot of safe countries like Croatia, Italy, and then France, or Croatia, Austria, Germany, Belgium, and then France, to get the benefits that they get here. This is just going to increase the pull factor, and it's going to make the backlog larger, like Michelle said. So we need to not go down this scheme.
What undercuts what you're saying is, again, that basic fact: 85% of people have
that's too many, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of people who are granted asylum who shouldn't be granted asylum.
But that's judged by the Home Office, which is hardly the most compassionate a department which
clearly it is if they give 80%. If they give 85%, clearly they are, but they're giving asylum to a lot of people who shouldn't have it.
Because they deserve asylum, because they're fleeing places like Yemen, Iran, Syria. These are places with 98%
loads of people are coming from Albania, and they're coming from other safe countries as well, and coming through France, and they're getting...
Albania's a really good example. Because we have a returns policy with Albania, like we used to have with the EU, the numbers from Albania have been brought down because people who are not going to be granted, who don't have their status approved, are being moved back.
We used to have that with the EU. We
don't have that with the EU. If we had things like that, if we had legal routes into this country, the immediate pressure at entry points into the UK...
There are legal routes from Afghanistan and Ukraine. We're taking a lot of people from those countries.
Right.
But
This conversation, everyone, will rumble on and on. Where do you stand on it at home? And also, I think there's been talk of a potential national emergency being declared. Would you be in favour of that? What would it mean? And what would it even impact anyway? Your thoughts, get them into me, all the usual ways. When I come back in a couple of minutes, I want some of your thoughts. But also, I'm asking you, are you prepared for the national emergency alert that's going to be going off on your phones this weekend? Do you think, yes, thank you, Rishi Sunak, helping to keep me safe? Or do you think, will you lot pack it in, stop it trying to push us into a state of fear? What says you? I'll see you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it. Like, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as SNP Treasurer Colin Beattie becomes the latest arrest in the investigation into the party's finances, are the Scottish separatists on the brink of collapse? Plus, Nigel Farage responds to Welsh Labour's plans to give £1,600 a month to young asylum seekers. Join Dan, Tom Bauer, Amanda Platel and more of Britain's top commentators 9 to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party and Athol Hatwell is the editor of Labour Uncut. Lots of you guys getting in touch about that last story about whether or not £1,600 a month is a good idea over in Wales for so-called young unaccompanied asylum seekers or not. There's a lot of you have been in touch that live in Wales. Jason says, I am from Wales. I'm in my mid-50s and an ex-soldier. I worked all my life, but he had a heart attack, he says, and had to go on universal credit. He says, I could only wish for £1,600 a month. One of my viewers, Debbie, she says she's a retired teacher. She says she's had to retire after a brain injury. She's worked all of her adult life. She's asking, where's compassion for someone like me? She says, I get disability and I don't have a fraction of the amounts that you're referencing. Lots of people as well making comments comparing the pension, the amount of money that you get as a pension versus the £1,600 as well. Right, let's move on, shall we? Because speaking of the government and their harebrained schemes, there's another one. Because this weekend, are you ready for it? The National Alert System will be tested. It'll be pushed to your mobile phones on Sunday. It'll make quite a big siren sound. It'll vibrate and all the rest of it. And it's come under criticism and scrutiny a fair bit, actually, from a few different places. Women's Group, for example, saying that if someone's living with a domestic abuser and they've got a hidden phone, it will alert an abuser to that. Perhaps if someone's driving, it'll distract them and perhaps, I don't know, lead to crashes or whatever. David, if we just park those nuances for a second and talk just more generally, do you support this whole kind of emergency siren?
No, it's terrible. It's ridiculous. It's such an intrusion into people's everyday life. And it's going to happen on a Sunday afternoon when a lot of people are going to be relaxing with their families. It's also going to be St George's Day, which is England's national day, of course. It's going to ruin that day for our country as well, you know, if you're from England too.
But
absolutely.
How can you say with a straight face that an alarm for 10 seconds on a phone is going to ruin England's national day?
Well, because it's like an intrusion. It's just really Orwellian. It's like imposing a new system on us, and you don't know where this is going. We've had the last 3 years of lockdowns and all this kind of coercion and fear-mongering and the campaigns we've seen, and people are, like, very disturbed by that. I think this is just another example of the government doing something which is going to increase the level of fear in the general population, and another intrusion of the government into our personal lives and everyday lives. Like them sending an alarm and a siren to our phone. And a lot of people aren't going to be expecting it, and they could be quite scared by it.
But maybe they're just trying to keep you safe.
I don't think so. I mean, this particular one is just a test, isn't it? But why not have, you know, we've got sirens that we had in the Second World War, but there's not been a single test of them in the last 80 years. Why suddenly now is the government trying to do this in our own mobile phone devices? This is really intrusive and quite Orwellian and frightening, and it shouldn't be done. I think this is something the government should just stay out of it and keep off our phones.
No offence sitting there for David. What do you make to it?
I think it's a very good idea. I think the idea of a national alert where, if God forbid, an emergency, a more virulent version of the pandemic strikes, there is a means of contacting everyone.
So give me an example then of what you would think is the kind of emergency that would warrant pushing in an immediate alert to everyone's phone.
A nuclear bomb going off. This one. I'm a child of the 80s. Basically,
I think people know about that.
If a bomb goes off and I get a message on my phone telling me what, go in your living room, Michelle, there's been a nuclear bomb.
To be honest, my flippant suggestions aside, there'll be a hierarchy of different scenarios where alerts would be triggered. I think
give me one then.
Well, OK. So whether there is if there's a sufficiently virulent terrorist attack using some form of biological weapon, if there is a more virulent version, a more contagious version of the pandemic, the point is it is useful to have an alert system that we can be contacted. And if we're going to have one, it should be tested. And if it's going to be tested, because IT always needs testing, better to test it in the middle of the day and actually make sure everyone knows about it than, for example, at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday when people really will be petrified.
Is there a part of you, because actually when I press pause and look back on the last few years with the COVID thing, the amount of kind of basic civil liberties that we had removed from us under the guise of this pandemic, people actually now, it's the norm, or it was some people's norm. Some people actually would still like it to happen, that we're told we can't leave the house. You can only step foot outside your doorstep for 30 minutes a day or whatever it is. To me, that is a massive overreach of the state's power. Is there not a small part of you that actually worries that so many people in charge got a little bit full of their own importance during COVID? They quite like this notion of being able to control people, and this is just an extension of that.
I think my view on things like lockdown, if we'd have locked down 2 weeks earlier, tens of thousands of people wouldn't have had to die. If we'd have had the circuit breaker on time, tens of thousands more people wouldn't have had to die. We've had nearly 200,000 people die in this country. And the evidence, the independent evidence on lockdown is that it was effective. Now, not every decision was right. Some of the decisions, certainly some of the way the policing happened, where those poor ladies who were walking in Derbyshire got nicked for having a cup of coffee. That's mad, completely mad. And certainly mad given how the laws were enforced and delivered to us, given there were parties happening in Downing Street. But
I'm itching to respond on this lockdown, but let me let you respond.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly isn't true. I mean, in the first year of the lockdown, there were not 200,000 excess deaths. I mean, there was 10 or 20,000 excess deaths, and the flu disappeared in the statistics. So a lot of what was diagnosed as COVID was actually just a flu. There has been some excess deaths since the rollout of the experimental injections, but that's another story. But what
the
this is...
vaccines, to give them their correct name.
Well, that's what I call them. But this is just, this was shown shows that the government was scaremongering completely unnecessarily, and they've been doing it for 3 years. This is just a continuation of the scheme. And what I fear might come in is that they will make some kind of legislation or regulation that says if you get an alert on your phone that says do something because we say there's an emergency or a pandemic or whatever, and you don't do it, then that will become some kind of criminal offence. This is where this potentially is going. Well, no,
the
I mean,
idea that
this
the government
is
can
I'm
organise
just
itself to
looking
do
at
anything like that.
Well, it could do. This is what they're trying to bring in. It's not a conspiracy. This is like a...
And running big organisations is difficult. This government particularly has demonstrated it's barely capable of keeping itself on the road. The idea that they will be able to implement some form of grand conspiracy involving moving media and moving police and army and forcing us to do things, is what it says on the tin. It's a means of alerting us if something really bad happens. And sometimes we just, the government isn't lying to us. Sometimes the government is just trying to help us.
You're a trusting man, Atul. That's what I can say is trusting. Where do you sit on that conversation? Do you sit there and say, thank you? A great one, Rishi Sunak. Thank you so much for trying to keep me safe. Or do you think it's a little bit more overreach of the government than necessary? Your thoughts, keep them coming in. I'll have some more of them in a couple of minutes after the break. But I also want to talk to you about business as well. Do you think that some companies are focusing a little bit too much on the whole kind of work virtue signalling thing as opposed to their core customer base? And what would be the impact if the answer to that is yes? See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. David Curtin is the leader of the Heritage Party in Athol Hartwell, is the editor of Labour Uncut. Lots of you getting in touch on that last one about the emergency alerts. Josh says, why won't you just turn the alarms off? He says he's just turned his off. He feels that the government has caused too much fear recently. Richard's saying these alerts are all about leading us into a world where we consider this as normal. He says, you know, it stems from things like the COVID pandemic. David, however, though, says, what is the problem here? This is all just a media fuss about nothing. We'll keep your thoughts coming in. Let's move on, though, because you might be aware that Bud Light, did you see the commercial that's caused a little bit of controversy, shall we say? It featured the trans activist Dylan Mulvaney. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, a lot of people kind of went on social media and started saying, oh, I'll never buy a Bud Light again or whatever. And Budweiser now have kind of hit back. They have released more, how can I say this, traditionally kind of masculine, pro-American kind of advert that people are saying now has come about for them trying to undo some of the damage that was caused by that first one. David, what do you make to it all?
I think they made a massive mistake. I think they employed someone and they employ people to do their publicity that just live in a bubble and have got no experience of the real world and real people who buy their products. And then they've gone down this road of trying to make their brand look woke in order to be inclusive and diverse, but alienated the vast majority of customers who use their products or buy their products. And we see this time and time again. And it's people just need to realise there's people out there who don't agree with them and don't see the world in the same way as they do, and against all this ridiculous wokery that we don't want rammed down our throats.
What do you think to it at all?
I suspect Budweiser's sales are going to rise. I think they're going to rise for two reasons. One, there's so much more publicity about Budweiser. It's not most people don't really have a strong view one way or t'other on this, but the idea that once you've got that brand name in your head, and, you know, when it comes to beer time, when you're at the bar, you're thinking, which one? Oh, that one. So I think there's an aspect to this where they're, just because of the publicity, their sales will probably rise. But I also think that what they're trying to do with that Dylan Mulvaney ad, it's not my cup of tea, but they're trying to grow their market. There's a demographic out there. They will have spent millions of pounds researching that. They will have done all sorts of audience segmentations and all sorts of research that says this is going to unlock X for them. Now, it's kind of backfired on them a little bit because they've now had to release this other ad. But in the grand scheme of things, in the kind of mix of people's lives and everything happening, they've just got their name in people, onto TV, into print.
But for the right reasons, though, I suspect that is the question. It's like the whole Nike thing that chose a guy to promote female sports bras. You know, that's not really had a great response among many either, has it?
Yeah, it's the same guy, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then also Gillette did the similar thing in 2019 when they alienated almost all of the people who bought their Gillette razors and shaving foam by portraying men as toxic, masculine people. So they have hardly recovered from that.
I think the facts back up alienated all. For most people,
lots, not all.
This just sort of goes, goes, it's a fast-flowing river, it floats by, there's some broad recognition of this brand, but most people don't engage with it.
What I find quite interesting is the social media kind of campaign stuff, because you see a lot of it against advertisers that choose, for example, to work on this channel. So what will happen is there's a very bullying campaign happening online towards this channel, and they will message brands and say, how dare you advertise on GB News? Then they panic, these brands, and say, oh, OK, then we won't do it. And I sit there and I think, well, what about actually your customers that do watch GB News, that love GB News, actually? Do you not value their custom? That's something that I can't help but think about often. Anyway, look, you guys, you've divided on that emergency one. There's not a lot of division on that £1,600 for the migrants one. There's not a lot of support for it out there, I can tell you. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. Lots of people asking you if I'm unwell today. Yes, I've got a cold, but I'm a trooper, so I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much, gents, for your company tonight. Nigel Farage is up next.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine day for many tomorrow. Sunny spells, a few showers are possible in southwest England, and there will again be a brisk easterly wind generated by this chunky area of high pressure sitting over Scandinavia, keeping things mostly dry, but also feeding in easterly winds from the North Sea. Hence why it's felt pretty chilly in Scarborough, while it's also been pretty balmy in northwest Scotland. That easterly wind continues to bring in some cloud over parts of northern England, Wales, and a few showers through the night across southernmost counties of England. Very hit and miss. Most places will stay dry. Well, we've got the clearest skies. A bit of a chilly one across Scotland. Pockets of frost are possible in rural spots, but that easterly breeze generally keeping temperatures in towns and cities between 3 and 6 degrees. We start tomorrow then with a lot of cloud in southwest England, a few scattered showers. Might even see the odd heavy one here and there, but they tend to ease away. Quite cloudy at times through Wales and the Midlands. The odd shower is possible, but most places